What if, starting tonight, you never slept again? Not for one night, not for two, not ever. At first, it wouldn't seem like an emergency. You might yawn a little more than usual. Your coffee might taste better than ever. You'd tell yourself, "I'll sleep tomorrow." But tomorrow never comes. Hour after hour, your body keeps waiting for something that never happens. A repair process that never begins. A cleanup operation that never starts. Deep inside your brain, billions of cells continue working without the rest they were designed to receive. Your heart keeps beating, your lungs keep breathing, your liver keeps processing nutrients. Everything appears normal, until it isn't. Because sleep isn't simply the absence of being awake. It is one of the most essential biological processes on Earth. Every animal we've ever studied, from tiny insects to giant whales, spends part of its life asleep. Evolution has had hundreds of millions of years to eliminate unnecessary behaviors, yet sleep survived. That alone tells us something remarkable. It isn't a luxury. It isn't wasted time. It's a biological necessity. Tonight, we're going to follow exactly what happens when that necessity disappears. Hour by hour, day by day. We'll watch the brain struggle to stay awake. We'll see memories begin to fail, emotions lose control, reality itself begin to distort. And we'll discover why, despite all of modern science, no human has ever found a way to escape the need for sleep. The clock reads 10 p.m. Normally, this is when your body begins preparing for sleep. As darkness settles around you, your brain quietly releases melatonin. Your core body temperature begins to fall. Your heart slows slightly. Your muscles relax. Across your entire body, thousands of tiny changes begin guiding you toward sleep. But tonight, you ignore every one of them. You stay awake. At first, nothing dramatic happens. You can still think. You can still talk. You can still work. If someone looked at you, they might not notice anything unusual. But inside your brain, a chemical called adenosine is quietly building up. Every hour you're awake, more of it accumulates. Think of adenosine as your brain's pressure gauge. The longer you stay awake, the stronger the pressure becomes. It's simply becoming less able to regulate itself. This growing pressure creates what scientists call sleep drive. It's your brain's way of saying, it's time. Normally, you'd fall asleep. The pressure would disappear. Your brain would reset. But tonight, there is no reset. Midnight arrives. Your eyelids feel heavier. Concentration takes a little more effort. You reread the same sentence twice. You forget why you walked into a room. Small mistakes begin appearing. Not because you're lazy, not because you're distracted, because the brain itself is beginning to lose efficiency. Around 2 in the morning, another system joins the struggle. Your circadian rhythm. Deep inside your brain, a tiny cluster of neurons called the suprachiasmatic nucleus has spent your entire life acting as your internal clock. It doesn't care about meetings or deadlines or your determination to stay awake. It follows light. Darkness tells it night has arrived. Every cell in your body begins expecting sleep, but sleep never comes. And for the first time, 2 powerful biological systems, your circadian clock and your sleep drive, are pushing in the same direction. Stay awake, no matter what. your body wants the exact opposite. By 3 in the morning, your brain begins making choices it normally wouldn't. Simple decisions take longer. Words become harder to find. You may start laughing at things that aren't particularly funny, or become irritated over something completely insignificant. Your emotional balance is already beginning to shift. One reason lies deep inside the brain. The prefrontal cortex, the region responsible for planning, judgment, self-control, and logical thinking, is one of the first areas to lose efficiency when sleep is delayed. Normally, it helps keep your emotions in check. It weighs consequences. It slows impulsive reactions. It tells you to pause before you speak. But as wakefulness stretches on, that control begins to weaken. At the same time, another structure becomes more active: the amygdala, your brain's emotional alarm system. It evolved to detect danger and react quickly. Without enough sleep, the balance between these two regions begins to change. Logic becomes quieter, emotion becomes louder. It's one reason why even a single sleepless night can make small problems feel much bigger than they really are. A harmless comment might feel like an insult, a minor inconvenience like a disaster. Your brain isn't trying to make life difficult. It's simply becoming less able to regulate itself. By 4 in the morning, your attention begins to fragment. You aren't asleep, but you aren't fully awake either. For brief moments, parts of your brain may actually shut down, even while your eyes remain open. Scientists call these microsleeps. They can last less than a second or several seconds at a time. Most people never notice them, but during those tiny gaps, the brain simply stops processing the outside world. Imagine driving on a highway, traveling at full speed, and your brain disconnects for 3 seconds. Your eyes may still be open, your hands may still be on the steering wheel, but your awareness disappears. At highway speeds, 3 seconds is enough to travel the length of a football field without consciously seeing any of it. This is why sleep deprivation is so dangerous. It doesn't always make you feel asleep. Sometimes it makes you believe you're still fully awake. As dawn approaches, your body receives its first morning signal. Light reaches your eyes. Melatonin production begins to fall. Cortisol, often called the body's wake-up hormone, starts rising. Normally, this would help you wake after a full night's sleep, but today, there was no sleep to wake from. Instead, your body attempts something remarkable. It tries to keep you functioning anyway. Adrenaline increases. Stress hormones help compensate. You may even experience what many people describe as a second wind. For a short time, you actually feel more alert. It's a deceptive feeling, because underneath that temporary boost, sleep pressure continues building. Nothing has been repaired. Nothing has been cleaned. Nothing has been reset. The bill is simply being postponed. And your brain is quietly keeping track of every unpaid hour. Morning arrives. You've now been awake for 24 hours. You might think, I've done this before. Many people have. Students before an exam, parents caring for a newborn, doctors working overnight shifts, long-haul drivers, military personnel. It feels survivable. And for most healthy people, one sleepless night isn't immediately life-threatening. But measurable changes are already happening. Your reaction time has slowed dramatically. Studies have shown that after about 24 hours without sleep, your cognitive performance can resemble that of someone who is legally intoxicated in many countries. Not because alcohol is in your bloodstream, but because the brain's ability to process information has slowed to a similar degree. You may not realize it. In fact, sleep deprivation creates another dangerous effect. It reduces your ability to judge how impaired you actually are. You feel capable. You believe you're thinking clearly, but objective tests tell a different story. And this is only the first day. Most people assume the second day will simply feel like the first, only a little worse. It doesn't. Something new begins to happen. Your brain stops fighting sleep and starts stealing it. By the time you've been awake for 36 hours, your body has entered unfamiliar territory. The temporary boost from stress hormones is fading. Coffee no longer feels as effective. Fresh air, bright lights, cold water, they may help for a few minutes, but none of them can replace what your brain actually needs: sleep. Inside your brain, adenosine has continued to accumulate. The pressure is now overwhelming. Imagine trying to hold your breath. At first, it's uncomfortable. Then it becomes difficult. Eventually, your body simply takes over. Sleep works in a surprisingly similar way. The longer you resist, the stronger the biological force becomes. You begin forgetting small things, names, appointments, conversations from only minutes ago. You may walk into a room and have no idea why you went there. Your working memory, the system that temporarily holds information while you use it, is beginning to fail. Tasks that normally require almost no effort now demand complete concentration. Following a conversation becomes harder. Reading the same paragraph twice or even 3 times becomes surprisingly common. It's not that your intelligence has disappeared. Your brain is simply running with fewer available resources. Communication also begins to change. You pause longer before answering questions. You lose your train of thought. Words occasionally come out in the wrong order. Sometimes you know exactly what you want to say, but the right word refuses to appear. Most people describe it as brain fog. Scientists describe it as widespread reductions in cortical efficiency. Different words, same experience. Your brain is becoming less capable of coordinating countless networks that normally work together effortlessly. Emotionally, the changes become even more noticeable. Small frustrations can trigger surprisingly strong reactions. You may become impatient, restless, overly sensitive, or strangely detached. Some people become unusually quiet. Others become impulsive. The exact response differs from person to person, but almost everyone becomes less emotionally stable. Without sleep, your brain finds it increasingly difficult to separate genuine threats from ordinary daily stress. Meanwhile, your immune system is also beginning to notice the missing sleep. Even after a single sleepless night, the activity of certain immune cells starts to decline. Inflammatory signals begin to rise. Your body enters a state of mild biological stress. Nothing dramatic yet, but the trend has already begun. Night after night, sleep normally strengthens immune defenses, helps coordinate immune cells, and supports the production of important signaling molecules. Without that nightly maintenance, your defenses slowly become less efficient. It's one reason people who consistently sleep too little are more likely to become sick. The effects aren't always immediate, but they are measurable. Your metabolism is changing as well. The hormones that regulate hunger, ghrelin and leptin, begin shifting out of balance. You may suddenly crave foods rich in sugar, fat, or carbohydrates. Not because your body truly needs them, but because your brain is desperately searching for quick energy. This is why sleep deprivation and overeating are so closely linked. When people are exhausted, they don't usually crave salad. They reach for whatever promises fast fuel. Your body is trying to compensate for a problem that food cannot solve. As evening approaches, you've now been awake for nearly 2 full days. Something strange begins happening. The line between wakefulness and sleep starts to blur. You stare at a wall and lose several seconds. Someone asks a question and you realize you never heard it. Your eyes remain open, but your awareness briefly disappears. Micro-sleeps become more frequent, more unpredictable, and far more dangerous, sometimes lasting only a fraction of a second, sometimes several seconds. You cannot control when they happen. You cannot always recognize that they happened. Your brain is no longer asking permission. It's taking tiny pieces of sleep whenever it can, whether you want it to or not. By 48 hours, most people are no longer functioning normally. Concentration has become exhausting. Memory continues to worsen. Reaction times slow even further. Decision-making becomes unreliable. And yet, the most unsettling changes are still ahead. Because after 2 days without sleep, the brain begins to struggle with something even more fundamental: reality itself. 3 days, 72 hours, no sleep. This is where the experience begins to change completely. Until now, you've mostly been fighting exhaustion. Now, your brain begins fighting itself. The first signs are often subtle: a shadow that seems to move, a sound you could have sworn you heard, a face in the corner of your vision that disappears the moment you look directly at it. At first, you dismiss them. You're just tired, or so you think. But they become more frequent, more convincing, and harder to ignore. Your brain was never designed to remain awake for this long. Normally, sleep provides regular periods of maintenance. Neural connections are adjusted. Chemical balances are restored. Waste products are cleared away. Energy reserves are replenished. Without those nightly resets, communication between different regions of the brain becomes increasingly unstable. Information is still flowing, but it's no longer flowing efficiently. Imagine an orchestra with every musician still playing, but without a conductor. The instruments are all there. The music continues, yet slowly it begins to fall apart. One of the most disturbing consequences is the appearance of hallucinations. These aren't dreams. They happen while you're awake. You may see movement that isn't there, hear footsteps, voices, or faint sounds in complete silence. Some people report seeing insects crawling on walls. Others describe figures standing in empty rooms. The experiences vary, but they all share one thing in common. To the person experiencing them, they feel completely real. Why does this happen? Scientists don't believe the brain simply runs out of power. Instead, the boundaries between different states of consciousness begin to weaken. Normally, dreaming belongs to sleep. Reality belongs to wakefulness. But after prolonged sleep deprivation, those boundaries begin to blur. Tiny fragments of dreamlike activity appear during wakefulness. It's almost as if the brain, desperate for sleep, begins forcing pieces of it into consciousness. At the same time, your ability to judge reality continues to decline. You become less certain of what actually happened and what only seemed to happen. Conversations become confusing. Memories become unreliable. Simple problems feel impossibly complex. You may repeat the same task, forgetting you already completed it, or become convinced that someone called your name when no one spoke at all. The frightening part is that you often don't realize anything is wrong. Your confidence can remain surprisingly high, even as your performance collapses. Emotionally, the brain becomes increasingly unstable. Fear, anxiety, frustration, and sadness can all become amplified. Some people become withdrawn, others become suspicious. Some experience intense mood swings within minutes. The prefrontal cortex, already weakened after the first sleepless night, can no longer regulate emotional responses effectively. Meanwhile, the amygdala continues reacting as though danger is everywhere. Your brain becomes trapped in a constant state of heightened alertness. Ironically, the harder it tries to stay awake, the worse it performs.
Your body is struggling too. Blood pressure may begin rising. Stress hormones remain elevated. Inflammation continues increasing. Your immune defenses grow weaker. Your coordination becomes noticeably impaired. Even walking in a straight line can require concentration. The remarkable thing is, your heart, your lungs, your liver, they're all still working. They're doing everything they can to keep you alive, but they're doing it without the nightly recovery they evolved to expect. It's like asking an engine to run continuously without ever shutting down for maintenance. Eventually, small problems begin accumulating, and over time, those problems become impossible to ignore. By the end of the third day, the question is no longer, can you stay awake? Your body has already answered that. The real question has become, how much longer can your brain keep distinguishing reality from imagination? Because beyond this point, the risks increase dramatically. And although stories often claim that people simply die after a certain number of days without sleep, the truth is both more complicated and even more unsettling. At this point, a question naturally comes to mind. How long could someone actually survive without sleep? The answer is surprisingly difficult, because no ethical scientist has ever allowed an experiment to continue until death. No research study would permit it. The risks become far too great. So, despite decades of sleep research, there is no scientifically established number of days after which a healthy human simply dies from staying awake. And that's an important distinction. Sleep deprivation is unquestionably dangerous, but the exact limit remains unknown. One of the longest, carefully documented cases occurred in 1964. A 17-year-old high school student named Randy Gardner decided to test how long he could remain awake. His goal was simple: break the world record. Hour after hour, day after day, he stayed awake under observation. At first, the symptoms were familiar: fatigue, poor concentration, mood changes. But as the days passed, the effects became increasingly severe. He experienced memory problems, difficulty speaking, hallucinations, trouble recognizing objects by touch. His coordination deteriorated. Even simple mental tasks became surprisingly difficult. Yet, after more than 11 days without sleep, he didn't die. When the experiment finally ended, he slept, and over the following days, most of his cognitive abilities gradually returned. His story revealed something extraordinary. The human brain is remarkably resilient, but resilience does not mean invincibility. There's another reason this question is so difficult to answer. Outside of controlled experiments, people rarely remain completely awake, even if they believe they have. Microsleeps become unavoidable. A few seconds here, a few seconds there. The brain quietly steals tiny fragments of sleep without permission, and often without awareness. Someone may insist, "I haven't slept at all," but brain recordings often tell a different story. The body, in a sense, finds a way. This explains why truly continuous wakefulness is almost impossible. Sleep isn't simply a choice, it's a biological force. Just as hunger eventually drives you to eat, and thirst eventually drives you to drink, sleep pressure continues building until the brain begins taking control itself. You can resist it for hours, sometimes for days, but eventually, biology always wins. So if most people don't die directly from staying awake, what actually makes prolonged sleep deprivation so dangerous? The answer lies not in one organ, but in the gradual breakdown of many systems at once. The brain struggles to think clearly, the immune system becomes less effective, hormones lose their normal rhythm, blood pressure becomes harder to regulate, metabolism shifts, inflammation rises, judgment deteriorates, reaction time slows. Each individual change may seem manageable, but together they begin to reinforce one another. Like tiny cracks spreading through a bridge, the damage isn't caused by one failure, it's caused by hundreds of small failures happening at the same time. For almost everyone, sleep eventually comes, whether willingly or through brief, uncontrollable microsleeps. But there is one extremely rare condition in which something far more terrifying happens. A condition in which the brain gradually loses the ability to sleep at all, not for one night, not for 1 week, but permanently. And unlike every healthy person, those patients cannot simply catch up on sleep, because their brains have lost the ability to do what every human brain was designed to do.
There is one illness so rare that most doctors will never encounter a single case during their entire career. Yet it has taught scientists one of the most important lessons about sleep ever discovered. It's called fatal familial insomnia. Despite the name, it isn't ordinary insomnia. People with insomnia still have the ability to sleep. It may take longer, they may wake frequently, but eventually sleep comes. In fatal familial insomnia, something far more devastating happens. The brain gradually loses its ability to produce normal sleep at all. The disease is caused by a mutation in a protein known as a prion. Unlike bacteria or viruses, prions contain no DNA, no RNA, just a misfolded protein capable of triggering other proteins to fold incorrectly as well. Over time, these abnormal proteins accumulate inside the brain. One region is affected more than almost any other, the thalamus. The thalamus acts as one of the brain's great communication hubs. Nearly everything you consciously experience passes through it: sight, sound, touch, movement. And perhaps most importantly, it plays a critical role in helping the brain transition into sleep.
As the disease slowly damages this region, sleep becomes increasingly fragmented, then almost impossible. Eventually, it disappears almost entirely. At first, the symptoms can seem surprisingly ordinary: difficulty sleeping, anxiety, restlessness. But unlike common insomnia, they don't improve. Weeks become months. The brain grows progressively less capable of entering restorative sleep. Hallucinations appear. Memory declines. Blood pressure becomes unstable. Body temperature becomes difficult to regulate. The autonomic nervous system, the network responsible for countless automatic functions, begins losing its balance. Even sweating, heart rate, and breathing patterns can become abnormal. As the disease progresses, the distinction between day and night begins to disappear. Patients become profoundly exhausted, yet still they cannot truly sleep. Imagine feeling the overwhelming need for sleep every minute of every day, while your own brain has forgotten how to provide it. It is one of the cruelest neurological disorders ever identified. Researchers spent years asking a simple question: why does this disease become fatal? Is it the lack of sleep itself, or is it the widespread damage occurring throughout the brain? The answer is probably both. The disease destroys critical brain structures, but it also demonstrates something equally important. Sleep isn't optional. The brain cannot simply decide to function without it. Remove the ability to sleep, and eventually the entire system begins to collapse. Fortunately, fatal familial insomnia is extraordinarily rare. Only a tiny number of families around the world carry the mutation. Most people will never encounter it. Most physicians won't either. But its existence revealed something that scientists had suspected for decades. Sleep isn't something the brain does when it has nothing better to do. Sleep is one of the jobs, one of the most important jobs. Without it, the brain slowly loses its ability to maintain itself. Fortunately for the rest of us, our brains still know how to sleep. Every evening, the same remarkable process quietly begins again. The question is, why would evolution make something so vulnerable, so incredibly important? Why would every animal, from birds to whales to tiny insects, accept the enormous risk of becoming unconscious every single day? The answer may be the clearest evidence yet that sleep is not time lost, it's time invested. If sleep were only rest, evolution would have gotten rid of it long ago. Nature does not keep unnecessary processes. Anything that wastes energy, anything that reduces survival, anything that doesn't help reproduction eventually disappears. Yet sleep remains. Across almost every species studied, it has survived hundreds of millions of years. From insects to reptiles to birds to mammals, everything with a brain sleeps. Even animals that are constantly at risk of predation still enter states of sleep. That alone tells us something important. Sleep is not optional. It is fundamental. So what is sleep actually doing that is so essential? The answer is not one single function. It is many, happening at the same time. Inside your brain, sleep is when information is reorganized, memories are strengthened, unnecessary connections are weakened, emotional experiences are processed and stored in a more stable form. The brain is not just turning off, it is actively restructuring itself, like a library being reorganized overnight so everything can be found again tomorrow. At the same time, a cleaning system becomes active. Fluid flows more efficiently through the brain's tissue, removing metabolic waste products that build up during wakefulness.
By morning, the environment inside the brain is physically different than it was the night before. Cleaner, more balanced, more efficient.
Meanwhile, your body is undergoing its own restoration. Hormones support tissue repair. Muscles recover from daily strain. Cells replace damaged components. The immune system strengthens its response capacity. Hormones reset their daily rhythm. Blood pressure drops to give the cardiovascular system a break. Even metabolism adjusts itself for the next day. Nothing is idle. Everything is coordinated. And yet, despite all of this activity, you experience none of it consciously. There is no awareness of repair, no perception of cleaning, no memory of restoration. Sleep is one of the only biological states where the body performs essential survival maintenance while the mind is completely offline. This is why sleep deprivation is so dangerous. It does not break just one system. It slowly disrupts all of them at once. Cognition, emotion, memory, immunity, metabolism, cardiovascular stability. Everything begins to drift out of balance, not immediately, but progressively, quietly. And this is also why every attempt to ignore sleep eventually fails. You can delay it, you can resist it, you can override it temporarily with stress hormones, caffeine, or sheer willpower, but you cannot remove it. Because sleep is not something the brain chooses to do. It is something the brain requires in order to continue functioning at all. So when you return to that original question, what happens if you never sleep? The real answer is not a single dramatic event. It is a gradual unraveling, not of one system, but of all systems working together, until the brain can no longer maintain the illusion of wakefulness. And eventually, it takes control back, one way or another. Sleep always returns. And now, as we reach the end of this journey, you can let go of all of it. No more explanations, no more systems, no more science, just stillness. From here on, the narration slowly fades, and what remains is only a soft layer of sound, a low brown noise, steady, deep, like distant wind moving through an empty space, and a quiet, open atmosphere beneath it, giving your mind room to settle, without effort, without direction, without resistance. There is nothing you need to do now, nothing to solve, nothing to follow. Just allow everything to slow down on its own. You've stayed until the end, so thank you for being here. Now you can rest. Let the night take over, and let sleep come in its own time, naturally, quietly, and completely. Good night.